Thank you, Scott. Let me introduce Marcia, who's our speaker for tonight. Marcia Watson is a longtime member of the Maryland Ornithological Society, and among her many accomplishments, she was a founding member of the Cecil County chapter, is the editor of the Birders Guide to Maryland and DC, the online Birders Guide to Maryland and DC, and is currently a member of the MOS Sanctuary Committee. Marcia holds a doctoral degree in biological sciences and has served as faculty at University of Delaware and University of Maryland Global Campus. So please join me in welcoming Marcia as she speaks on rediscovering the MOS sanctuaries. Okay, let me make you a co-host, Marcia.
Okay.
And you should be able to share.
All righty. Let's see. Here we are, and I just need to start the slideshow. There we are. Everybody see that okay? Are we good to go?
You're going to put it in presentation mode, or?
It is in presentation mode now.
Okay, we're seeing your whole.
Huh. Let me leave and do it again.
I think there's something here.
Go up to slideshow.
Yeah, I think should be.
Well, I had done that. I did go up to slideshow and clicked on it, so it should have come through to you in that way.
There we go.
Okay. Good. Okay. So here we are talking about the MOS sanctuaries. And let me tell you a little bit about how this presentation came to be. And first of all, I've got to figure out how to close this. I'm seeing everybody still on my screen and it's overlapping my slides. Got to figure out how to change that.
I mean, I think you can minimize.
Yeah, I found it. Okay. So in January of 2017, MOS held a statewide retreat that was attended by, I think, about 50 people. And one of the recurring themes at that retreat was that MOS needed to do more to educate MOS members about all of the different things that were available through MOS. And another theme that kept arising was that people wanted presentations that could be shared among all the chapters. And then a third theme that kept arising was about the sanctuaries. And it came to pass that it was quite apparent that a lot of people had strong opinions about the sanctuaries, but didn't know many facts about them. So one of the recommendations that came out of that retreat was that somebody should put together a presentation about the sanctuaries that could travel to all the chapters. And I said to myself, well, gosh, I've been teaching biology for most of my life. Surely I can put a presentation together. So I volunteered to do that. I volunteered to put a presentation together about the MOS sanctuaries. At the time, I wasn't on the sanctuary committee, but I soon joined it. And I reached out to other sanctuary committee members and to folks throughout the state who had been sanctuary volunteers. And they were very generous with giving me information and providing photos of the sanctuaries. They just really inundated me with lots of information. I also took an entire summer and I started reading about the history of the sanctuaries, primarily in Maryland bird life. Back in the day, before Maryland Yellowthroat came to pass as the newsletter for MOS, Maryland Bird Life had a lot of committee reports and other types of reports that gave a lot of insight into the history of the sanctuaries. So I thought that the best way to learn was to read Maryland Bird Life from day one. So I took a summer to do that. I read from volume 1, number 1, all the way up to, I have to admit, I didn't get all the way through to the present day. I stopped in the 1990s, because by that time I had joined the MOS board, and from the meetings, I had a pretty good memory of things that had happened at the sanctuaries. So reading Maryland BirdLife really opened my eyes to some sanctuary facts that I didn't know. So I call this program Rediscovering the MOS Sanctuaries because I hope to share with you some tidbits that a lot of people have forgotten. So we currently have 10 sanctuaries, and I'll bet that most people have heard of two of them, Cary Run and Irish Grove, because they have houses where people stay and they have a lot of activity. But the other 8 sanctuaries, perhaps you've never heard of. And I won't list all of their names right now, but just looking at the list, you can see that they're scattered across the state. They vary quite a bit in size. The smallest one is number 6 there, Mandary's Creek, that's 8 acres. And by far, the largest one is Irish Grove, number 10, over 2,300 acres. In all, MOS protects over almost 3,000 acres across the state. And these are sanctuaries that are literally owned by MOS. MOS holds the deed for these properties. Here's a map that shows the location of the sanctuaries. The purple dots are the various locations. We have 3 out here in Western Maryland in Garrett County. There's one in Frederick County, that's Seymour Cooper Sanctuary, one in Prince George's County, one in Anne Arundel, 3 on the upper eastern shore, and here's Irish Grove down here on the lower eastern shore. Irish Grove is so far south, if it were any farther south, it would be in Virginia. The MOS Sanctuary program got started in 1955 with the donation of a check for $500 from a man named John Besson. Now, just to put this date in perspective, MOS was founded in 1945. It was founded as an offshoot from the Natural History Society of Maryland. And here, 10 years later, the sanctuary program got started with this little donation, little by today's standards, but at the time in 1955, $500 was a lot of money. Now, there's some interesting things about Mr. Besson. He was never a member of MOS, but he and his sister Adele owned waterfront property in Anne Arundel County, and they had a lot of friends in MOS, and they were somewhat of naturalists. They enjoyed inviting their MOS friends over for picnics and bird watching on their property. And so they became supporters of MOS. And when Mr. Besson's sister Adele passed away, he decided to give this money in her memory because she was quite fond of MOS and wanted to promote bird watching and the MOS organization. Mr. Besson passed away just a month later. So MOS was fortunate that the donation was given before his death. In fact, this photo taken from Maryland BirdLife shows the presentation of the donation check, but Mr. Besson was not present for the presentation. He was in the hospital at the time. So he didn't live much longer after the donation was given. This is MOS president at the time, Vernon Clean, accepting the donation check. So at that point, MOS chapters started looking for sanctuary land that would be suitable to purchase. It had been a dream of MOS members really from almost day one in 1945 that MOS would someday start owning sanctuaries. So as I say, the chapters went out, they spread across the land looking for property to buy. There was another interesting side effect of the donation check, and that was it directly led to MOS becoming formally incorporated as a nonprofit. From 1945, when it was founded, up until 1955, MOS was not incorporated. And it became known that Mr. Besson was interested in giving money, but it was also known that he was not going to give the money unless the organization became formally incorporated and developed a formal board and so forth. So that's what happened. So MOS can thank Mr. Besson not only for the first sanctuary donation, but also for leading to MOS incorporation. So a question that I'm sure everybody has on their minds is, why does MOS have sanctuaries? Now, it's interesting that even though for 10 years, MOS had been talking about, the early MOS leaders had been talking about the desire to have sanctuaries, there wasn't much written until 1960, which is soon after MOS acquired its first sanctuary, when Chandler Robbins, who was the editor of Maryland BirdLife, wrote an editorial about why MOS wanted sanctuaries. And I don't usually like to put a lot of words on slides and read them, but I think these words are so important, I'm going to take the time to read them because this is really the mission statement for the sanctuaries. Chandler wrote, and you probably all know him as Chan. He passed away in 2017. His name is going to come up time and time again throughout this presentation, so I'm going to be informal and call him Chan as we all knew him. Chan wrote, "We have a fine, secluded tract on which to relax and enjoy the world about us, a tract to which we can retreat from the noise and smells of the city. We have unpolluted streams in which we can study animals that once were more widely distributed throughout our state. We can conduct group projects and carry on individual studies on a great variety of birds, mammals, reptiles, amphibians, or insects. We can have family outings and club field trips. But more than this, we have an opportunity at very modest cost to the society to provide educational facilities, not only for our own membership, but also for the Maryland public. The hobby from which we derive so much enjoyment can be converted into a tool for sowing the seeds of conservation, so that more of Maryland's citizens will learn to appreciate the natural areas of our state, and in turn, help to preserve more of these areas for the enjoyment of future generations. This is our great challenge." So Chan's editorial called out three main reasons to have sanctuaries. One is preservation and protection. Education and research are a second purpose, and just plain old recreation, getting out there and enjoying the land and the birds, is the third main purpose of the sanctuaries. Today, we're going to take a tour through the MOS sanctuaries, both chronologically and geographically. We're going to bounce back and forth between the history and the geography of the sanctuaries to see how MOS has met its goals of those different purposes for the sanctuary program. So the very first sanctuary that MOS established, and it's the one that Chan was writing about in his editorial, was Rock Run Sanctuary, which was established in 1960, and it persisted as an MOS sanctuary for 16 years until 1976. It's located in Harford County, or it was located in Harford County, in what is now Susquehanna State Park. It consisted of 57 acres, including this house, which was 4 stories. And MOS didn't own this sanctuary. The land and the house were leased from a private landowner named Mr. J. Gilman Paul for the princely sum of $10 a month, $120 a year, which at that time, again, was considerable. This map, which is imposed on the Susquehanna State Park map, the official trail map, shows the outline of the sanctuary boundary. It's kind of shaped like a grand piano here. The outline of the sanctuary overlies the existing trail system in Susquehanna State Park, and it was located just uphill from the Susquehanna River, which is here. If you're uncertain where we are on this map, Conowingo Dam is to the north off the top of the page here. So Rock Run was a busy place in its heyday. It hosted monthly meetings of the Hartford chapter, as well as picnics, field trips by all the MOS chapters. All of the existing MOS chapters at the time hosted field trips to Rock Run, and many outside organizations did as well. By outside organizations, I mean schools, churches, garden clubs, you name it, they came. It was an exciting thing that MOS had a sanctuary. There was an active bird banding program at Rock Run. Winter bird feeding. You're going to hear about this when we talk about all the sanctuaries. At the time, it was thought that birds needed food in the winter in order to survive. And so bird feeding in the winter was a priority. Every sanctuary hosted very large bird feeders that were capable of holding many, many pounds of bird seed. And people would trek out there and through the snow to keep those feeders filled. There were bird lists created, trails built and marked, a study grid was laid out. And I mentioned Chan Robbins earlier. It was Chan who was responsible for a lot of the research end of these activities. And he employed his 4 children to help build the trails and lay out the study grid. The 4 kids, scrambled through the underbrush, marking the study grid. And if you don't know what a study grid is, it's usually 100 meters, but could be different, staked locations where people do point counts for birds so that you have a geographic base map for your bird sightings. And there were also nature education camps held at Rock Run. But why don't we have it anymore? The house was quite remote in the day. It was a dirt road, a gravel and dirt road that led down there. And there was repeated vandalism to the house, quite serious vandalism. There were many, many break-ins. Things were stolen from the house. The landlord, Mr. Paul, died in 1973. And after his death, the state of Maryland purchased his land as well as additional land to form Susquehanna State Park. Even after the formation of the park, MOS continued to lease an acre that included the house until early in 1976. But the final blow was a fire that was set in the house by vandals that almost totally destroyed the house. It really gutted it. So at that point, MOS and the Hartford Bird Club sadly decided that the best thing to do was to relinquish the lease. So the Hartford Bird Club was quite sad to lose its meeting place, but lo and behold, not 1 month later, this property, Tumsuden Sanctuary, was donated to MOS and the Hartford Bird Club by Carolyn Tumsuden, who was a physiologist who worked at Aberdeen Proving Grounds. And her will specified that she bequeathed her property. It was 1.5 acres with this little modest house adjacent to Hartford Glen Nature Education Center in the middle of Hartford County. So the Hartford Bird Club gladly moved in. They were very, very glad to have this as a replacement for Rock Run. And that through an agreement with Hartford Glen, MOS had access to the Hartford Glen trails. However, this property, just like Rock Run before it, suffered from repeated vandalism. And so even though MOS and Hartford Bird Club made good use of it, in 1994, MOS decided to give it to Hartford Glen. And Hartford Glen, by the way, is run by the Hartford County Public School System. It's their nature education wing where they hold training camps for teachers as well as outings for students. So Hartford Glen now owns the Tumsuden Sanctuary, and the last I heard, they were using it as a storage building. They weren't really using it for any active programs. So another former MOS sanctuary, sanctuaries have come and gone over the years, and here is one right in your county, Montgomery County. It was known as Adventure Sanctuary, currently known as Adventure Conservation Park. It's a tract of 14 acres that was active as a sanctuary from 1969 through 2008. It included an indoor nature education center seen in the back of this photo on the hill. Excuse me, I have to sip water because my throat is getting dry. And now I'm going to have a cough drop. This property was donated by Alice Hosteller. And the building that you can see was her own home. She was very keen on the idea of leaving her property as a nature education park. She was very, very interested in nature education for young people. And so during her lifetime, she turned this property over to a 3-way trust that consisted of MOS, Hood College, and Montgomery County Parks. And this 3-way trust was left to administer her land and fulfill her wishes after she passed away. It was quite, quite an active place in its day, much like the other sanctuaries. Notably, there was a bird banding program here carried on first by Margaret Donald, and then later Gemma Radko from your club had a MAPS bird banding program. However, MOS eventually withdrew from active management of Adventure, and it's now managed solely by the County Parks Department. This map shows the location of Adventure, just north of the town of Potomac, fairly close to the Potomac River. And the green blobs on this map is from the Montgomery Parks atlas, the Montgomery County Parks Atlas, and the green blobs show other county-owned land. You can see that although Adventure is quite small, only 14 acres, it's part of a larger conservation landscape that consists of a number of stream, valley, and other parks associated with it. So there's a lot of good habitat there. This map shows the trails at Adventure. Even though it's no longer run by MOS, it's still there and it's still open to the public. It's open every day from sunrise to sunset. You can go there. It has diverse habitat consisting of upland woods, hedgerows, and some floodplain along a couple of streams. As I just mentioned, the adjoining parks provide over 100 acres of preserved land. And here are some pictures from the bird banding activities. I mentioned Margaret Donald. Her and her husband Don conducted a bird banding station from 1972 through 1995 that banded almost 100,000 birds. And this, I think, is one of my favorite photos from the sanctuaries. This is a photo that appeared in Maryland Bird Life, and it shows Margaret Donald herself meeting with an elementary school class and showing them birds in the hand. And that really encapsulates one of those main goals of the whole MOS sanctuary program. Here's Gemma Radko with a Cooper's hawk that she caught in her banding station, which ran from 2000 to 2008. Her banding program was partially funded by the MOS Education Committee, and Gemma banded over 600 birds of more than 60 species. And here's a common yellow-throat and an orchard oriole that she also banded. And Gemma gave me a lot of information about Adventure. She's one of the few people that remembers when it was operating as an MOS sanctuary. She told me that there was also a bluebird nest box trail there that was run by Susan Strange. Just to mention one more sanctuary that is no longer with us as a sanctuary, it was located in Anne Arundel County called Hancock's Resolution. This was 12 acres that was owned by a nonprofit named Historic Annapolis, and they were interested in getting someone who would use the property and fix it up. It is a historic farmstead that dates back to colonial times. And at the time that they leased it to MOS, it was really in bad shape. The farm buildings were literally falling apart, as in bricks falling out of the walls and stones falling out of the walls. So the expectations were that MOS would not only use it as a bird sanctuary, but would also fix up the buildings. And within a year, it became clear that that was more than MOS could take on. So in 1971, after just a year, MOS said, yeah, we can't continue with this. So this property is now operated by the county as a historic site that's open to the public. They do demonstrations of farmsteads from colonial times there with, people in historic costume. So this brings us to the first sanctuary that MOS actually purchased, and that is Cary Run, purchased by MOS in 1962. It's one of the 3 sanctuaries that MOS has out in Garrett County in Western Maryland. This photo is taken from the cover of Maryland Bird Life in December of 1962, and it shows the historic farmhouse at Cary Run. This sanctuary, so again, the timeline, 1955 was the date of Mr. Besson's donation of $500. 1962 is when that money was finally put to use in purchasing a sanctuary. It took a long time to find suitable land. So there was, a lot of activity in those intervening 7 years that finally resulted in the identification of this property as a sanctuary. And this house is still standing and still in good use. It's going strong. This photo was taken by one of the sanctuary caretakers, Melissa Hensel, in 2021. And it shows a brand new roof that was put on, a nice metal roof that was put on the house in April of 2021. I just want to run those 2 photos side by side to show you the difference in the intervening years. The house is still there, but the big difference is the trees. The trees have gotten a lot larger. In fact, some of these maple trees in the background were so large and overhanging the house that MOS removed some of them because they were contributing to some of the roof damage. But the house is still there and it's available for people to stay in for overnight trips. Cary Run, as I mentioned, is located in Garrett County. It's just northwest of Frostburg, up near the Pennsylvania line. So when MOS found it, what became the Cary Run Sanctuary consisted of 52 acres, including the house and a number of outbuildings. MOS purchased it in 1962 for $4,000 in cash that was raised by MOS in the matter of months. I think that the land was found in August of 62, and by November, MOS had signed the deed and completed the purchase. So MOS was very busy in the intervening 3 or 4 months raising $4,000, which again, at the time, that was an awful lot of money. And then in 1973, the sanctuary was enlarged by the purchase of 110 acres. For this, the purchase price was considerably more, $40,000. Half of it was mortgaged and half was paid in cash. But again, MOS conducted very vigorous fundraising, and they were able to pay that mortgage off in just 3 years. Every MOS chapter provided a donation, as well as many individual members. The list of people who provided donations encompasses pages and pages and pages. Hundreds of people provided money for the purchase of this sanctuary. Many outside organizations also chipped in. Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, garden clubs, school classes from throughout Garrett and Allegheny County. They saved pennies and nickels and sent them in to help MOS buy the additional land. I just want to show you some additional pictures showing the changes in the sanctuary over the years. Here's a view from 1962 that shows the entrance road and hills and forests in the background. And here's the entrance road, what it looks like today. Again, this forest has grown up here on the right, and you can barely see beyond it to the rest of the entrance road. Here's another view that has changed over the years because the trees have gotten larger. This field that used to be in the background is no longer visible. It's been grown in. So that actually, those, let me go back to this. This set of photos before and after, or then and now, really illustrates one of the challenges that MOS has in purchasing or managing its sanctuaries. What you buy is not what you end up with years later. And so one of the management challenges is figuring out what habitat changes are to come and how to plan for them and how to plan what resources MOS will need to take care of the property. It's an ongoing issue. So the southern boundary of Cary Run is formed by a historic road called the Old Braddock Road that was used by General Braddock in the French and Indian Wars to move his troops into Ohio, toward Ohio. He still had to go through West Virginia. The house on the sanctuary was built in 1887 by the people who owned the place. They built it by hand from white pine that they cut on the land. It was a working farm in its heyday. They grew potatoes, oats, corn, and strawberries, plus there was also an orchard. It was really a self-sufficient place. But it was eventually abandoned because of the cold, snowy winters. It was very inaccessible out in the mountains of Western Maryland. These two photos, by the way, illustrate a nature trail that exists following the route of the Old Braddock Road. And there are descriptive placards along the entire length of this nature trail. I will tell you, if you go to Cary Run and do this nature trail, it's steep going for the first part of it. So you have to be prepared and have, good legs to do the steep hillsides. Cary Run sits at an elevation of about 2,500 feet. It includes the stream named Cary Run, which is a tributary of the Savage River. Hefner Run is a small tributary of Cary Run. Hefner Run is particularly beautiful because for most of its length, it runs through hemlock forest. And it's just really, really pretty in that hemlock forest. There's a freshwater pond that was added by MOS by damming Cary Run just north of the house. There are old fields that are mown annually. This view shows one of the fields. These fields are mown annually to maintain habitat for sparrows and other grass scrub breeders. There are hemlock woods, as I mentioned, also stands of white pine and Douglas fir. Most of the property, though, consists of mixed deciduous woods with wild cherry, maple, and oak predominating. And there's a small area of lawn that's adjacent to the house. From the very beginning, Cary Run became a busy place. The Allegheny chapter hosted an annual picnic there. There was winter bird feeding. As I mentioned, this was thought to be important. And here's somebody standing in the snow, reaching up to this tall bird feeder to keep it filled. One of the bird feeders at Cary Run was capable of holding 100 pounds of birdseed. There were Girl Scout and Boy Scout camps that were held there in the early years. And in fact, the Girl Scouts laid out the trail system at Cary Run, and the Boy Scouts built the trail markers. University ornithology classes were held there from Frostburg State University. There were also elementary school classes, one is shown here, that visited. And there were adult birding weekends when people came just to enjoy Cary Run and its amenities. And here's a group having a picnic on the lawn in front of the house. The picnic tables are still there. Nowadays, Cary Run is still a busy place. As I mentioned, it's possible for MOS members to stay at the house, or it's also possible to camp on the grounds. There's an annual spring work day that hosts a team of people. There's a nest box, bluebird nest box trail on the property that also hosts tree swallows. And I'll say a little bit more about that later. There's a long-standing research project at Cary Run on the bluebirds and tree swallows that use those nest boxes. We also have some habitat enhancement programs carried out at Cary Run. Here are some photos from a couple of years ago where we're doing tree plantings at Cary Run. This man in the yellow is Chuck Hager, who's one of the caretakers for Cary Run, and the man behind him is John McKittrick, at the time the president of MOS. And these photos, this one and this one, show members of the Maryland Entomological Society doing a bug blitz at Cary Run in late summer. I think it was 2018. This is Sue Muller from Howard County, who is doing night lighting on a sheet for moths and other nocturnal insects. And these are some of the members of the Entomological Society looking at insects they've captured. So that was a fun weekend where we focused on something other than birds. Let's see. Oh, Chuck Hager. I meant to mention that Chuck has had a tradition for many, many years of running a week-long youth education camp, nature education camp. Chuck has done this on his own dime. Although it's been an MOS-supported activity, Chuck has paid for the majority of it, and he runs it single-handedly. He hosts maybe 15 to 18 young people, ranging in age from middle school through high school at the Cary Run house. And I mentioned the blitzes with the Maryland Entomological Society. This map shows the current extent of the MOS, or the Cary Run Sanctuary. There are three main plots. A here is the original sanctuary shown in this map with the trail system. The house is here, and the trail system emanates from the house. Did I point to the right thing? Yeah, the house is about here. And there's trails leading out in all directions from the house. So that's here. And then B and C are the 110 acres that were added at a later time. And there's trails through those tracts as well. B is particularly interesting because it has quite a lot of field habitat. The breeding birds of Cary Run are quite spectacular, and I'm not going to read you the list of birds from this slide, but during the first and second breeding bird atlases, there were 121 breeding species documented at Cary Run. There have been additional birds found during BBA3, which, as you all know, is still ongoing, so we don't have a final count yet. But you can see there's birds that breed there that we don't enjoy here in central Maryland. So it's worth a trip out to Cary Run during breeding season to see some of these spectacular birds. I'm particularly partial to the blue-headed vireos that were mentioned earlier tonight. They're really easy to see at Cary Run because they do breed there. However, Cary Run is facing a serious threat, and that is an invasive insect called hemlock woolly adelgid that was accidentally introduced to this country from Asia. And what it does is it's these little white dots. These are the insects themselves. They cluster on the twigs of hemlock trees and they suck its juices and eventually kill the tree. So hemlock woolly adelgids are now rampant all over the East Coast in hemlock forests, and many forests have totally succumbed, been totally killed. We estimate that about 90% of the hemlocks at Cary Run are infested with these insects. And we were somewhat late in discovering them. I think we discovered them about 2.5 years ago. And the Sanctuary Committee very carefully studied the problem to determine what to do. There are chemical pesticides that are used to control the hemlock woolly adelgids as well as predatory insects. And there are pros and cons to both approaches. So we consulted experts in the field, including Dr. Mike Ropp, who is he's a retired entomologist at University of Maryland. Many may have heard of him. He's known as the bug guy, and he's often seen on TV and quoted in the newspaper as Maryland's leading entomology expert. However, we recently made a breakthrough. Jeremy Castle, our current Sanctuary Committee chair, has been really diligent at helping to find resources for MOS to tackle the woolly adelgid problem. And he sweet-talked the Maryland Department of Agriculture into starting a control program for us at Cary Run at no cost to MOS. The treatments are quite expensive, but MDA typically, the Maryland Department of Agriculture typically is confined to treating public lands such as state forests. However, they decided to make an exception for Cary Run because it is open to the public. So the good news is we're going to get the adelgids under control with the help of MDA. And even better news is that the forestry students at Allegheny College are chipping in to conduct regular monitoring. So we're getting some research out of the control program as well as control of the insects. And one thing I should say here is that it's really important to control the insects and not let them kill the hemlocks, because the hemlocks are the keystone species for an entire ecosystem. The hemlocks shade the streams. The streams support a whole host of native species, including native brown trout and a number of aquatic insects. A number of birds breed in the hemlock woods, including hermit thrushes. So if the hemlocks all die, that whole ecosystem is wiped out and all of the animals that depend on it. So we thought it was really important to get this under control. So I'm happy to report that we've got good progress here, thanks to Jeremy's diligent efforts. Jeremy did an excellent job getting this program underway. So I'll just leave you with some final pictures of Cary Run so that you have an idea of how beautiful it is. This is Baltimore checker spot, which is the Maryland state insect. It's a butterfly, as you can see. And Cary Run, this is now an endangered butterfly, and Cary Run is one of the few places that still support it. These are some of the hemlocks along the entrance road. One of the fields is seen here. Here's one of the attractive little markers of a trail. And here's Brent Byers, former sanctuary chair, checking a bluebird nest box. This is milkweed. So moving on through Garrett County, and I'm watching my clock and I see I have to talk faster or leave some things out. So I will try to pace myself here. We have two other sanctuaries in Garrett County, Caroline Wilson, and we're going to visit there next. Caroline Wilson is 86 acres that was acquired by MOS in 1988. It was a gift from the Nature Conservancy, which in turn had received it as a donation from the family of Caroline Wilson. The Wilsons are a prominent family in southern Garrett County. In fact, the nearest little village to Caroline Wilson Sanctuary is named Wilson. For the family. The family owned quite a bit and still owns quite a bit of land in the area. So this tract was owned by Caroline Wilson, and the family passed it on to the Nature Conservancy and then to MOS. The sanctuary consists of the wooded stream valley that surrounds the little Youghiogheny River. And the tract owned by MOS is surrounded by farms and a few residential lots. Here's a satellite image that shows the sanctuary, which is here, kind of an uneven outline. And you can see there's farms and residential lots all around it. Here's one farm, here's some other farms. This arcing line that forms the boundary of the sanctuary is not a road, that's a railroad track. And one of the challenges of Caroline Wilson Sanctuary is that it has no road frontage. So we get into it by driving, this is a public road here, we get into it by driving down a private driveway and parking adjacent to the railroad tracks, and then we walk the tracks to get in. That's not ideal. And another project that Jeremy, who has unbounded energy, Jeremy has taken on trying to legally acquire a right-of-way into Caroline Wilson Sanctuary. And he's working on a couple of different options. One would be through this farm, and one would be through this privately owned land here. We don't have any progress to report, but hopefully sometime in the future, we'll have better access to Caroline Wilson Sanctuary. Here's some scenes of what it looks like. Here's the railroad tracks that we walk, and you're on a high embankment that looks down into the valley where the Little Yacht is located. So here is indeed a photo looking from the railroad embankment down into the valley, and the stream is down in here. When you get to the bottom of the valley, this is what it looks like. There's an old road that presents quite easy walking, and it's quite beautiful. It's mixed deciduous woods primarily. The area hosts some, again, notable breeding birds, including ruffed grouse, alder flycatcher, ravens, chestnut-sided warbler. And here's some final scenes of Caroline Wilson to show you how beautiful it is and why it's worth a visit. A third sanctuary that we have in Garrett County is actually our newest sanctuary. It's the Chandler and Eleanor Robbins Sanctuary at Red Run, which consists of 45 acres. It's entirely wooded. It's a mix of deciduous and conifers, including some hemlock stands. And really spectacular is that the center of the sanctuary is a mountain bog that's fed by a stream called Red Run. This land was purchased by Chan and Eleanor Robbins in March of 1967. They never intended to live here, and they never built a house or any other buildings. There are no buildings on the sanctuary. They bought it simply to preserve the habitat because they were quite taken with how spectacular it is. So when Eleanor Robbins passed away, I believe in 2008, that might not be right, I can't quite remember. But when Chan passed away in spring of 2017, their 4 children decided that the only thing they wanted to do with this land was to give it to MOS. So MOS received it as a sanctuary in 2017. And this map, again, that we've been coming back to, shows the location of the Robbins Sanctuary. It's quite far north, up near the Pennsylvania line, which is here, a little bit west of Cary Run, just north of I-70 and Old Route 40. So, the ecological significance of Red Run and the Robbins Sanctuary is that this is an Ice Age relict. The area was formed during the last Ice Age about 15,000 years ago, and ecologically speaking, it hasn't changed very much since then. Red Run is the water, the stream that feeds the bog that's in the middle of the Robbins Sanctuary. And the headwaters of Red Run are in Wolf Swamp to the south. If the words Wolf Swamp sound familiar, it's because Wolf Swamp was previously a Nature Conservancy property that they have since given over to Maryland DNR. Wolf Swamp and the bog in Cary Run are peat bogs, and they harbor plants and animals that are typically found much farther north. So a DNR survey in the 1980s and 90s identified 2 rare species at Red Run in the vicinity of what is now our sanctuary. The 2-spotted skipper, shown here, which is a rare state endangered butterfly, and white-fruited mountain rice, which is a state threatened plant, and that's shown here. Here's a map of the Red Run Sanctuary. This is the bog in the middle All of the rest of this is wooded land here and here. The main access is along Guthrie Lane, which is a private lane. We have a little parking spot at a trailhead that leads down into the bog. And there's also access from the Myerdale Road. We have frontage along Myerdale Road on the southeast side of the sanctuary. And here is a photo of the very spectacular bog that you get to by walking through the woods. This bog is filled with swamp sparrows. It's quite amazing to go there in the summertime when the sparrows are singing. Like the other sanctuaries in Garrett County, there are some spectacular breeding species here. Again, I'm short on time, so not going to read the list, but really nice birds to see there. And here are some more views of what it looks like. Beautiful, beautiful wooded habitat and the bog. Moving farther east, we come to Seymour Cooper Sanctuary. This is one of the small ones. It's just 14 acres. It's located near Catoctin Mountain Park, which is owned by the National Park Service, and Camp David. It's just 3 miles from Camp David, the presidential enclave. This land, like Caroline Wilson Sanctuary, was transferred from the Nature Conservancy, this one in 1978. Mrs. Seymour Cooper preserved this land as a memorial to her husband. It's entirely wooded. Previously, it had been logged, and Mrs. Cooper wanted to prevent it from being logged anymore. There are no trails in the sanctuary, but it's quite easy to walk through because it has a fairly open understory. So this is a map showing the sanctuary. This is a main public road here, and we have frontage along the road. The land is on a slope. It's on the slope of Little Piney Mountain. So as you walk away from the road to the south, you're walking uphill. But it's not very steep. It's a fairly gentle rise until you get to the top of the sanctuary. We've got some identifying signs posted at the sanctuary. These are private residences adjacent to the sanctuary. Again, really notable breeding species are here, including wild turkey and broad-winged hawk. And again, just some photos showing you what the sanctuary looks like. Here's some members of the Frederick Bird Club birding along the road along with my husband, Gene Scarbula, during one of our visits to the sanctuary. Moving along again, we come to Prince George's County, where MOS owns Piscataway Sanctuary, located in the southwest corner of Prince George's, not very far from Washington, D.C. This is the D.C. border right here, so not too far south of D.C. and near the border with Charles County. This land was donated to MOS by a developer in 2008. It's adjacent to a residential community, and it was part of the developer's set aside as forested buffer land for the community. It's adjacent to a county park to the south, and it consists of 82 acres, mostly wooded. There are several streams that pass through the sanctuary. All of these are in the Piscataway Creek and Potomac River watershed. And you can see some photos here of the creek. Here's a map showing what the sanctuary looks like in satellite view. Here's the residential community. The main entrance to the sanctuary is through the residential community. We have a little parking area and a pavilion that was built for us by the developer. And from there, there's a trail that heads down through the woods. Unfortunately, it's a one-way trail. We don't have a loop trail yet, but perhaps one will be coming soon. But we have a trail that heads to the northern border of the sanctuary, and then you have to turn around and come back. There's another trail that comes in through Gardner Road Park, which is the county park that's located to the south of the sanctuary. So you can park here and then walk in through the county park along this trail. We know again from the breeding bird atlases what species breed in this area. And again, I'm not going to read the list, but you know, all of our sanctuaries host some really nice birds because this one has a lot of wetland, wood ducks, and some other water-associated birds are found here. And again, some scenes showing what the sanctuary looks like. You know, when I look at these photos, I always want to say, oh, I really love this sanctuary. It's so beautiful. But that's true for all of them. I love them all. Each one has their own type of beauty. And this photo is one of my latest ones. It actually shows Jeremy Castle, our sanctuary committee chair, with a Patuxent Bird Club member walking one of the trails through the woods. Moving along, I'm really running out of time. We come to Mandary's Creek Sanctuary, our smallest sanctuary located in Anne Arundel County on a bay of the Severn River. Here's the sanctuary located on an offshoot of Little Round Bay. This is Mandary's Bay, Mandary's Creek, but Little Round Bay is right up here. As I mentioned, it's just 8 acres. Most of it nowadays is marshland, although there are some woods that are located along this main public road, which is River Road. This land was donated to MOS in 1974 by former MOS president, Colonel William Bodenstein. Remember, I mentioned that sanctuary that's no longer an MOS sanctuary, Hancock's Resolution in Anne Arundel County. The Anne Arundel Bird Club was really sad that sanctuary didn't work out, but it inspired Colonel Bodenstein to donate this land to MOS. So MOS got a sanctuary out of it nonetheless. This is MOS's only marshland habitat on the Western Shore. So even though it's small, it is significant in serving as a showcase for this type of habitat. There aren't any trails, most of it is marsh, but there's easy walking through the woods that are along the road, and even easier walking nowadays, and I'll show you why in a couple slides. Another notable effect of the donation of this sanctuary is that it directly led to the Anne Arundel Bird Club and other MOS members engaging in active lobbying of the Maryland legislature in order to get tax-free status for MOS-owned lands. So we don't pay county or state property taxes on any of our lands, with the exception of Irish Grove in Somerset County. Somerset County refused to go along with the tax-free status, but the other counties all did. And so that's written into the Maryland Code of Regulations now. Here's some photos showing the sanctuary with the strip of woods along the road. Here's a little stream that goes out to the open water beyond the marshland. This is former sanctuary chair Dominic Nucifera getting a better view of the marshland. And here's a red-headed woodpecker that Dominic photographed when he and I were out there one day. The woodpecker was, if we were taller, it would have been at arm's length. It was in the tree right next to us. So we had a great view of that bird. Some of the breeding species, again, are water-oriented because of the marshland location of this. But wood ducks are always a favorite. However, something that happened that was quite significant earlier this year, in the springtime in April, there was a brush fire that we don't know how it started, but ironically, Dominic Nucifera, the former sanctuary chair, is a firefighter in Anne Arundel County, and he was on scene fighting the fire and got some photos of the fire in progress and immediately afterward. And then these other photos were taken by other sanctuary committee members and volunteers who have been monitoring the sanctuary in the aftermath of the fire. The woods along the road were almost totally destroyed. And what wasn't taken by the fire was cut down by the firefighters in order to protect the residential development nearby. Those homes were really threatened by this fast-spreading fire. So we were left with bare ground, but within a week, the growth started to come back on the remaining vegetation, and it is now almost back to its former appearance. I don't have any more recent photos, but the growth has been restored. So the damage to the sanctuary, if you want to think of it that way, was really not long lasting, but it was a significant event. One of those unexpected things that the Sanctuary Committee never knows what's around the corner. Okay, now we're journeying over to the Eastern Shore. We've crossed the Chesapeake Bay Bridge, crossed Kent Island, gone down Route 50, and we come upon 3 sanctuaries on the Upper Eastern Shore. And the first one we're going to visit is Mill Creek, located in Talbot County. This was the second sanctuary that MOS purchased. It consists of 108 acres that were purchased in 1964, with more added in 1965 and 1971 to bring the total acreage now to 156 acres. There was also the donation of a tract of land by a woman named Mrs. Royce Spring. Just like Seymour Cooper, she donated this land in memory of her husband. So Mill Creek it's almost entirely wooded. It's mixed deciduous and pine woods in the Mill Creek Valley. And this is Mill Creek, and we do have significant frontage along the stream. And there is a cabin, no, cabin's not the right word, shelter, picnic shelter, that was built by MOS members. And I don't think I have a picture later, but there's actually a brick fireplace within the shelter and picnic tables. So the Talbot County chapter of MOS has been used to having breakfast meetings that are held in the shelter after a hike through the sanctuary. When MOS first acquired Mill Creek Sanctuary in the mid-60s, it generated a lot of excitement. Remember, this was just the second sanctuary that MOS owned. So a little map of the sanctuary appeared on the cover of Maryland Bird Life in 1964. And the map, you should really go to Maryland Bird Life, which is available online, and take a look at this map in total, because it's in close-up, because it's quite lively. It has little pictographs of the different birds and wildlife that are found in the sanctuary, and a little drawing of an adult and a child visiting the sanctuary, some bird watchers behind them. Really quite a very nice little map, illustrated map. And here's what the sanctuary looks like today. This is Route 662. Passing through the sanctuary, there's a tract to the north of 662. This is the section that was donated by Mrs. Royce Spring. And the main part of the sanctuary is located south of Route 662. And there is a nice trail system through this sanctuary. The trails are shown here. So we know a lot about Mill Creek Sanctuary. We've got a good basis for what Mill Creek Sanctuary has been like, thanks to a biological survey that was performed by a team led by Jan Reese, starting in March of 1984. His team visited Mill Creek every 2 weeks for 14 months, and they noted everything they saw, every living thing, as well as taking soil samples and so on. So they wrote an 82-page report that is available online through the page about Mill Creek Sanctuary on the Birder's Guide to Maryland and DC. You can get this 82-page report through a download there. The report lists fungi, vascular plants, invertebrates, everything that was found on the sanctuary, including, of course, the birds. And there's also a summary of the history and cultural aspects of the sanctuary. And here you can see photos of some of the activities. Here's an old-time photo showing a youth group inside the picnic shelter at the fireplace. Here's Betty Mackey, the president of Talbot Bird Club, touching up one of the no trespassing signs that are posted along the boundary. No trespassing is somewhat of a misnomer because the sanctuary is open to the public. But I guess what we want to say is that the signs indicate that you're entering privately owned land. There's a lot of infrastructure consisting of trails and bridges on the sanctuary. Here is the former chair of the Sanctuary Committee, Dottie Mumford, conferring with a couple of the, I think that's Jan Reese there and Danny Poet, with a couple of the Sanctuary Committee volunteers. And here's members of the Talbot Bird Club lined up after a workday at the sanctuary. So the Talbot Bird Club regularly holds field trips here and picnics. I already mentioned the breakfast hikes. And I don't think there have been youth programs here recently, but there certainly were many in the past. I do want to give you a heads up that if you want to visit, now is not a good time. The sanctuary is closed annually for deer management starting September 1st through January 31st. And MOS, starting about 6 years ago, entered into a lease arrangement with a professional hunting guide who takes paying clients out for deer hunting. The long-term goal is to improve the habitat. The deer, as you probably know, eat the understory. So when you look at the the understory of Mill Creek, there are very few ground cover plants or mid-story plants. The deer have eaten them all. So we undertook the deer management program in order to get a handle on control of the deer to help improve the habitat, but we also get income from it. The hunting guide pays MOS an annual fee. And we're starting to see the benefit of this program. I don't have a more recent picture, but volunteers at the sanctuary say that the understory plants are starting to come back. So it's paying off. We've got great breeding birds at Mill Creek. Again, I'm not going to read the list, but 69 breeding species have been documented here through the first and second atlas, and more have been added recently in the third atlas. I really have to fly through these next sanctuaries in order to stick to a reasonable time limit. But, you know, just like all the sanctuaries, Mill Creek is extremely beautiful, especially now in the fall. But it's great habitat. Oh, we have a little parking area that's behind this gate. The gate is kept unlocked, so you can just drive in, park your car off the road, and then close the gate behind you, and no one will know you're there. Continuing on through the upper eastern shore, we come to Marengo Woods, which I'll bet maybe only one or two people in the audience here have ever heard of. Marengo Woods is one of our lesser visited sanctuaries. It's also located in Talbot County. It's 49 acres that is mostly loblolly pine. So it is unique in being mostly conifers, unlike all of our other sanctuaries, which are mainly deciduous woods. There are some deciduous trees scattered through the sanctuary, and here's a photo of the corner of the sanctuary showing dogwood in bloom, for example, in the spring. There's also some sarvisberry in there and some other native trees. And the sanctuary was donated in 1989 to MOS by a group of people who were local landowners. And you can see their names on this plaque, which is located here at the corner of the sanctuary. They donated it in memory of two of their friends. And again, just like the Seymour Cooper Sanctuary in Frederick County, this one was donated in order to prevent further logging. The land here, as well as on adjoining parcels, had been logged for many years. So there aren't any trails here, but it's really easy walking. It's flat land, and there's a fairly open understory under these old growth trees. The loblolly pines are now considered old growth because it hasn't been cut for a long, long time. However, I do want to mention, even in the summertime, you should wear boots. There aren't any streams, but there are some vernal pools that persist. Actually, vernal is the wrong name because they persist throughout the summer, and you can encounter them anywhere in this sanctuary. It's kind of almost triangular in shape, kind of a triangle wearing a little hat on it. And there's a parking area along this county road on the south side of the sanctuary. This is another road coming down from the north. And the parking lot makes a nice place to park to enjoy the sanctuary. The parking lot was put in by the manual labor of the Talbot Bird Club just a couple years ago. So it made a nice addition to the sanctuary. Even though Marengo Woods is fairly small, it is part of a much larger conservation landscape that consists of several thousand acres in the area. Here's a unit that's over 1,500 acres. Another nearby unit is over 2,200 acres, and 300 acres here are all in permanent conservation through various types of instruments, including Marengo Woods. Marengo Woods has a conservation easement on it that's held by the Maryland Environmental Trust. So this land, all of these lands will never be developed. They will remain good habitat for birds and other wildlife. Here's a list of some of the breeding species, some of the notable breeding species, of which there are more than 86, almost 90 species. Brown-headed nuthatches I always enjoy seeing when I'm there. And just like Mill Creek, you should beware of deer hunting, although not on the sanctuary itself. There are neighboring parcels private parcels on which deer hunting takes place. There's nothing we can do about that. But here, for example, is a deer stand that is located right on the boundary of our property, but it's just over the boundary, so it's on the neighbor's land. So if you go there during deer season, I recommend wearing safety orange hat and vest. And this is a photo of a deer bait station where they put corn to bait the deer in. So hunting is very active around there. And I promise I'm going to talk even faster now. More photos of Marengo Woods, another one of our beautiful sanctuaries. Here's one of the vernal pools. So the last sanctuary on the upper eastern shore is Myrtle Simon's Pilo, located in Caroline County. And this is a satellite image of the sanctuary showing its extremely irregular outline. It follows the stream bed of Gravelly Branch, which is a tributary of the Choptank River located to the west. It's a primary tributary of the Choptank. And the outlines, the boundary outlines kind of follow the stream bed of the stream bed of Gravelly Branch. This is a map of the sanctuary drawn by one of the Maryland Bird Club members showing a trail on the south side of the stream that still exists. There used to be another trail along the northern boundary, but it is so grown over you can't find the trail anymore. But the red trail down here on the south side is now still easily walked. So Myrtle Simon's Pilo is named after Mrs. Pilo herself, who was a member of the Caroline County Bird Club, who died in 1971. She lived on an acre in the town of Ridgely, and when she passed away, she left her house and land to MOS. There weren't any restrictions on the donation, and so MOS decided to sell the land. They gained $34,000 from the sale of the land and the house, and the proceeds were used to buy this sanctuary, which is really what Mrs. Pilo intended. She wanted a sanctuary for MOS. So it's approximately 61 acres. We don't have a good recent survey, and so the exact extent of it is somewhat unknown. And I already mentioned Gravelly Branch. There are some nice breeding birds in Pilo, including Prothonotary warbler, shown here, carrying a bug. So it's a confirmed breeding bird here on the sanctuary, and this is summer tanager. And here are some photos showing how beautiful Pilo is. Pilo has always been known for its wildflowers. So here's native columbine, and here's a native azalea in bloom. Here's members of the Caroline Bird Club here and here enjoying the sanctuary. There's a little seating area adjacent to the stream. Here's the stream, of course. That brings us to our last of the 10 sanctuaries in Somerset County, Irish Grove. And Irish Grove has a beautiful house, late Victorian house. And here's the entrance along the public road, Rumbly Point Road. So as I mentioned earlier, when we looked at the map, if Irish Grove were any farther south, it would be in Virginia. It's located on the shores of the Pocomoke Sound. So it is literally right on the border with Virginia waters. So we call it the jewel in the crown of our sanctuary system. It's over 2,300 acres, predominantly salt marsh, a few tidal streams that pass through the marsh. There are both fresh and saltwater impoundments or ponds within the property. There's a great deal of loblolly pine woods as well as some deciduous woods. About 45 acres are maintained as field habitat. The house itself was built in around 1890. We don't have an exact building date for the house. And in addition to the house, there's quite a bit of infrastructure. There's a screened picnic area shown here. It's an old barn that MOS converted. There are a number of sheds, observation platforms, trails with boardwalks and bridges. So there's a lot of infrastructure to be maintained. The aerial photos give you an idea of how large Irish Grove is. It's really huge. And this is the tax map. It shows normal-sized farms and residential lots, and all of the blue shading shows Irish Grove. It's just enormous compared to everything around it. Irish Grove was the third sanctuary that was purchased by MOS. I'm going to skip some of this, but the purchases were made over a number of years, and there was also some land donated. The first purchase was in 1968, and the most recent addition of land came in 2019 with a gift of 715 acres, including the marsh at Rumbly Point, which is just spectacular habitat. And this photo, I do want to point out, that's Chan Robbins himself on a ladder painting the siding at Irish Grove. These photos show the beauty of Irish Grove, just spectacular, spectacular images. This image shows Dominic Nucifora, the former Sanctuary Committee chair, along with Dottie Mufford, the sanctuary chair before him, and they are dedicating a trail to Dottie. And that's Paul Bystrack, a longtime sanctuary volunteer who's standing with them. Paul has been involved with Irish Grove since MOS acquired it. He made the initial visits with Chan Robbins that decided on purchasing the sanctuary, and he helped to lay out the trail system here. So Paul has been with the sanctuary for the sanctuary's entire life. We do have a nice trail system at the sanctuary. Here's the house. Here's the public road, Rumbly Point Road. And the house is located here with fields adjacent to it. There's a road that's drivable that goes back into the marsh to an area where canoes can be launched. And there's another partially drivable road here. And then there's a number of foot trails that emanate out through the marsh. The foot trails are shown in purple. So I'm going to skip much of this, the words on this slide, except to say that, like other areas along the waterfront, Irish Grove is suffering from sea level rise. And at Irish Grove, what we're seeing is marsh migration, where areas that formerly were known as high marsh, that were only flooded at high tide, are now becoming low marsh. In other words, they're flooded almost all the time. And like this area here, we used to have a trail through there, and no longer. It's not walkable anymore. We're also losing forested land because the trees are dying because of the water inundation. So starting now, we're getting some help from Audubon Mid-Atlantic, who are doing some test programs at Irish Grove to investigate new methods of controlling sea level rise in marshland habitat. And we'll talk more about that in future years as we get some results from that. One of the main things we do at Irish Grove is to hold semi-annual work days. One is coming up in the first week of November 3rd to the 5th. These photos show activities, the crowd gathered at former work days. So if you're free that weekend, please come on out and give a hand to help maintain all this infrastructure. Again, I'm skipping a lot of the things, but we do also have scientific research projects that take place at the sanctuary. Barn owls have been studied there for many years, as well as marshland sparrows. And these photos show how nice the house is on the inside as well as the outside. It's quite livable. It's capable of holding about 15 to 17 people on the inside, and there's space for camping in the adjacent lawn areas. So we can host a considerable crowd at Irish Grove. And here's some of the birds that are found at Irish Grove. Again, because of the spectacular habitat, we used to have black rails breeding here, no more. But we still have salt marsh sparrows and seaside sparrows that are hanging on. So again, I'm not going to read the list of birds, but spectacular breeding birds there. I just want to skip ahead. I already mentioned the work weekend. If you want to come, please let Jeremy Castle know. Jeremy, could you please put your email address in the chat so that people have it, so that they can respond to you for the work weekend? I'll just close with a couple of parting shots of Irish Grove. And I'm going to skip all of this. Oh, I wanted to say, if you're interested in helping with the sanctuaries, this slide calls out what we need. Something very simple. Visit the sanctuaries. Post the results of your visit on eBird or iNaturalist. The grounds are open daily and there's no fee for admission. We really need photographs of habitat, which if you're not, eBird doesn't take just habitat photos. They only will take photos of birds, but you can also always submit photos to the public Google Maps platform. We do have pins for all of the sanctuaries on Google Maps, and you can submit your photos on those pins. We need atlasing help. We have one more year left to go in the atlas, and we can use more help getting the sanctuaries documented. Fundraising and grant writing are ongoing needs. All of the sanctuaries need help with trail building and maintenance. at the Cary Run and Irish Grove sanctuaries. We need help with house maintenance. We do tree plantings and native perennial plantings at some of the sanctuaries. And if you can't do any of the work, we can always use donations. So please, again, get in touch with Jeremy if you're able to help out with any of that. And I'm just going to show one last slide to finish, to thank all the people who have helped at all of the sanctuaries over the years. So I will end there. And can I leave this slide up while we go to, if there's time for any questions?
Thank you, Marcia. That was really great. We don't have a lot of time for questions.
Okay.
But if anyone has a question, unmute themselves and ask. Question? I was wondering, you mentioned this hemlock, infestation, and you mentioned that Red Run had some hemlocks. How are the hemlocks at Red Run? Are they infested too?
They are. They are. Jeremy knows more about that. He's been out there more recently. Jeremy, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I'm sure that any place there's a hemlock out there that there is issue. We were more concerned with Cary Run, just given that it's 35 to 40 acres of the entire property. So now that we're kind of in contact with Maryland Department of Ag, then we can see if we can branch out. It's at Red Run, it's not nearly the key feature of the property that it is at Cary
Run. How do you keep someplace like Irish Grove free from vandalism?
There has been minor vandalism at Irish Grove, but I have to say at Irish Grove, we've been lucky. There hasn't been anything major. The main issues at Irish Grove have been storm damage over the years, sometimes quite significant. There was a major storm back in the 70s that took out a lot of the infrastructure that had to be rebuilt, over the years. More storm damage. Flooding, of course, is becoming more and more of an issue, and it's taken out some of the trails. Quite a few of the bridges have had to be either repositioned, rebuilt, or abandoned. But we've been lucky. The main issue is partying along the main road, the public road, Rumbly Point Road. Guys like to go down there. I'm going to say guys. There could be girls as well. I don't know. But people like to go down Rumbly Point Road and park along it and just, drink. And there have also been reports of people with automatic weapons firing them indiscriminately into the marsh in the middle of the night, which isn't good for the wildlife. But we've been lucky at Irish Grove. Cary Run, there was an incident where some teenagers got into the house and had a party and did some minor wreckage, but again, nothing major. We've just been lucky.
Okay.
Marcia, are there any bird walks, bird weekends, or bird days organized at some of the sanctuaries?
There are usually, by the local bird club. So Talbot Bird Club, Tri-County Bird Club for Irish Grove. I don't think Frederick usually has bird walks at Seymour Cooper, but there's talk of them having a work day there maybe sometime in the future. Allegheny Garrett holds walks at all three of the sanctuaries in Garrett County. So yeah, if you check the MOS calendar, those walks should be advertised by the local chapters. The sanctuary committee doesn't host walks, bird walks, but does host the work weekends or work days.
I just want to say, Marcia, this was fabulous. And I've heard you give the talk, and it's amazing how much more I've learned from it. It's really wonderful to hear the history of these places, because we know some of these people, and obviously we don't know a lot of them, but what a varied amount of sanctuaries. And it's really wonderful that MOS is doing this. So thanks to you and Jeremy.
Yeah,
and everybody. Sure.
Thank you for saying that, Anna. Every time I go to one of the sanctuaries, I think we are so lucky that MOS had wise leaders that they foresaw the need to preserve the land, and they were willing to make the investment of time and money to get those sanctuaries. And we're just so lucky. It's the most valuable thing that MOS has. And, it's tangible. We see people out there enjoying the sanctuaries. It's an amazing thing. And we're very fortunate to have it.
I also want to say that was a really inspiring and informational talk. I also want to say that if anybody's interested, if you're, Marcia, interested, I do have historic documents that the club has carried along about Venture Park. So I have those as PDF form. I didn't want to, so I have that if you want that later.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Adventure was one of the ones that was hard to find information on. When these sanctuaries die out and are no longer active as MOS sanctuaries, it's hard to track down people who know anything about them. So, Rock Run, I struggled with. Tum-Suden, there wasn't even a struggle. It was just a dead end. So yes, please. Anything you have, we will take. And Jeremy has paper files that he maintains for the committee. But in addition, we have a shared Google Drive for the committee where we archive our files. So if you give them to us, they will never be lost.
Okay.
Yeah. With a few friends, we went one day when the weather was gray. We were not seeing so many birds anyway. We left where we were and we looked for adventure, sanctuary, and we found it. And it didn't say anything about MOS, but it was there, and there seemed to be some activity there because. There was certainly I think some guardian or someone. It looked like someone might be living there or was there at the time. Anyway, that was
I just want
interesting.
to jump in and say that's in my Atlas block, and that's the one I'm. So I have gotten a few birds there, but yes, please go to Adventure and mark some breeding birds for me next spring.
Great. Thank you so much, Marcia.
Oh, absolutely. It's always a pleasure to talk about the sanctuaries, and I'm really thankful to you for hosting me. You are the last MOS chapter to hear this presentation. All of the other active chapters have heard it, except for Cecil, which doesn't have meetings. So you guys are the last. I've made the rounds.
It was great. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Good night.
I'm going to call a halt to the meeting now. So I'm going to end it.
Thanks all. Thanks, Emily.
Yeah.
See you next month.
Okay.
Thank you all.